Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andres Groves. I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Matthew Merrett. Matt, how are we doing today this week?
I'm all good, brother. We're at training camp, and most importantly, Chelsea season is fast approaching. We had some complaints after the last episode that I didn't do a Chelsea update, so we're looking good. I think for Chelsea right now, we need a sporting director. We've got Todd Bowley doing it all on his ones. So we'll see where that takes us.
Sure,
but looking forward to the Chelsea season. Looking forward to the Jets season.
We are definitely with the Jets. That's what we're here for, right? I think there's literally like about three or four of our guys who are Chelsea/Jets fans. So everyone else doesn't care. We don't care. But this is like the Premier League season starting soon. It's fun. The Euros are fun right now with the women's team doing really well in the final, so that's awesome. So yeah, there's good vibes, and the Jets there's just a lot of positivity with the Jets coming in as the guys they attended for the first day yesterday. We were recording on the Wednesday, so that they report to camp. And it's looking great. Mackay looking great. Yeah, I mean, that's just basically the news this week. There isn't much, obviously, but we're recording this before their first time they hit the field. I don't want to be reporting anything there shouldn't be anything to report this early unless something bad. So hopefully there's no news that we're going to miss that's worth or wanting to cover until next week. Maybe after a week of play, there'll be some stories coming out of how it's looking after a week. But I think today is just really discussing our next positional group in our rankings. I think we've had that break in the kind of roster battle series, and I think we've got rid of all the kind of weaker groups where we're looking at people, external people like to come in and all those things. Now we really focus on groups that we think are really strong internally, and actually looking at some decent players might not make the roster, and we're looking at that group. So this week we start off with that with the cornerback group, which has made a massive improvement this off season. So we'll go into that later in the episode. But first of all, we'll just kick off with a little bit of chat about really just how we're feeling about the players reporting. Bit of news about obviously with Mekhi Becton, CJ Uzama, Carl Lawson, three really, really big prominent names coming off the PUP list. How are you feeling about things generally?
Yeah, man, it's exciting. I think the PUP list kind of gets overblown a little bit, doesn't it, in terms of how important it is, because people see names being go on there, especially with the Jets when it was 5 important names going onto the PUP list. I think, and to be honest, I don't even fully understand it, but my understanding is it's just when you're going into camp, just if you've had an injury in the last bits and they want to kind of make sure you pass the physical before you start going. So it's just a box to be ticked for the player safety, which is always important. So glad that they're off it. I think of those names that you listed, Carl Lawson and Becton are two people we'd love to see really, really big, strong camps from. And I appreciate that might be one without the other, as they'll be going up against each other a fair amount. But I think if we can get those two firing on all cylinders, it makes the Jets look so much better on that offensive and defensive line, which is what this team's going to be built of in the run game and getting after the quarterback. So hopefully those two are ready, and I'm sure Salah, Lafleur, Olbert will bring them on at the right speed for them. It might not be that they're going 100 miles an hour in week 1 and they kind of need that kind of ramp up period because they missed those OTAs. But looking forward to seeing them back, kind of getting going, and it's exciting. I think we're kind of ready to see them take off. Obviously, with the offensive tackle position, Becton is super important, and obviously I was hoping that we'd bring in someone like Riley Reif. What a colossal overpay from the Chicago Bears, going up to $12.5 million.
Great.
To put this into context, Morgan Moses, who's a better tackle player
by far,
got a 3-year $15 million from the Baltimore Ravens. Riley Reif is going to earn almost that in 1 year, $12.5 million.
Yeah.
What is Chicago doing, man? You know what? I was looking on Twitter and saw some Chicago Bears tweets. They remind me so much of like the Jets and Darnold fans going into year 2 of Darnold. They are blagging this roster, and Justin Fields is probably, I think, will be a better player than Darnold's proven to be. But when they're trying to convince themselves of all of these little things, like Darnell Mooney's going to be a breakout wide receiver 1.
Robbie Anderson, isn't it? I mean, I think Mooney's better than Robbie, but it's like the Robbie situation again, right?
Yeah. And the offensive line, you're trying to convince yourself that it can work. And I'm just so grateful that we're not in that situation this year. And this isn't to say that Zach Wilson's going to be a better player than Justin Fields. I think he will be, but we can't base it off of that. But it's just so nice to be in this position where we've got the weapons, and you can list the weapons there. It's like 8, 9, 10 deep these days on the Jets with the offensive line, with the wide receivers, with the running backs, with the tackles.
That doesn't exist, right? Like, you can say these are legitimately good players, proven throughout the league, or with high draft value that you expect high performance from, whether they be first or second round guys. It's just legitimate talent that's either proven or expected, and you can foresee that without forcing it too much, which is what we did. Is what you're saying. What the Bears fans are doing right now. It's like and you say who's going to be better, Zach or Fields. I mean, statistically, you say they're probably even prospects coming in. I thought there was good parts for either, but Zach's got a way better chance of succeeding. The way that the Jets are building around him, and the way that the Bears just aren't. They haven't got the urgency right now that you want to see, and you can just see it from an outsider's point of view. From what we went through with Darnold, you can see that the same things are happening. New staff comes in, doesn't really do enough to get around the player, and then puts him in a situation where they're not going to be able to progress. And do they ever get past that hurdle? And does it damage them long term? We'll see. I think, like I said, I think Fields is a better. I think looking at Darnold was a great prospect though coming in, and so it wasn't like he was some sort of guy that was taking a third rounder or something. He was supposed to be a top prospect, just like Justin Fields, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. It could happen again. We'll see. But the Jets they've done a lot in this. You're looking at this team, and we're recovering. We're only halfway through our positional groups in terms of our battle, and we're already saying we've got good groups now. We've got only good groups. We've really a lot of good talent there now, and they've just put a lot of talent on this team in the last few years.
It just shows the importance of lining up your GM, your head coach, your quarterback on the same timeline. Before, when we had Darnold drafted by McCagnon and Bowles, and then Gase comes in, and then Joe Douglas comes in, and the GM knows they've got one chance to rip it down and build up the roster in their image. And Joe Douglas has done that. And unfortunately, Gase and Darnold were kind of the sufferers as he tore down the roster. Yeah. But that's what Ryan Poles is doing in Chicago, it feels like. He doesn't want to, although having said this, I don't know why he spent $10.5 million or $12.5 million on Riley Reif, because for the rest of the offseason, it seemed like he was kind of saving cap for next offseason. So you kind of limit yourself, and you kind of put yourselves in the positions where you could build the roster in your image. And I totally understand that. I totally get it. If I was a one-time GM and you had one crack at it, you would want to have those first 2 years kind of setting yourself up. That makes sense. It's when your quarterback isn't on that time scale. Yeah. And it's why the Jets have put themselves in this great position. And we don't know if it's going to pan out. We don't know if they're going to go whatever this season, but there is a process, and there is kind of everyone on the same page, same hymn sheet in terms of how they're approaching this season. And for the first time, they're kind of all aligned and all pulling in the right direction. So I think that's why it's exciting, and you're kind of seeing this, not just influx of talent, but influx of talent at the same kind of age, career stage, supplemented with those leaders like the Uzomers and Lawsons who've been around the league. But you kind of got people like from the free agency class. Jordan Whitehead's still young. Conklin's still young. DJ Reed's still relatively young. Players going into their prime, and you've got a couple of big draft classes over the last years. I know 2020 hasn't panned out quite how we wanted it to. Still got hope for Mekhi Becton. But 2021 and 2022, those look like big draft classes, all on the same age, and there's players of like skill positions, important high value positions, all who could be on this roster for, obviously not all of them will be able to stay here for 8-10 years, but there's like enough of a depth there that you're going to have players here for 8-10 years, hopefully, if all goes well.
And that's what you want to see. You want to see those players assigned to the Jets and just be part of that, the fabric of the team, where you go, this guy's a Jet, and he's been a Jet for a long time, and you can consider him like, a lifetime Jet. Even if they finish a couple of years at their career somewhere else, they have that big significant chunk of their career with the Jets, and they are like truly a Jet through and through. We haven't had that a lot really with a few players, like I said. So it's looking really good. I mean, like I said, you talk about with Lawson and Becton being the two guys that you mentioned, of those two of the three that have come back. I mean, to lose those two guys in the first year, you saw. I mean, what a difference! I mean, I think with Moses being, we felt it less because Moses stepped in so well, but that pass rush was just eviscerated with him, and then Vinny Curry also going out, just a little kind of extra heap of salt on top of that. You really see, and that's really the core tenet of like what they're trying to do on defense is like put pressure through the kind of through, put pressure on the passer, and then that helps out with the back end. And it was all come undone with that injury. So now they've got people in who can withstand injury. You got Jermaine Johnson in. You've got different people who have come in as well. You've got Curry back. You've got Martin. So there's different people in the building now. It's looking great, but Carl Lawson was just incredible, and we saw how good Mekhi Becton can be when he's fit, healthy, and ready to go. You saw how dominant he can be. I think it's just so great to see them coming. They're ecstatic apparently with where Mekhi is at, and why wouldn't you be? Because it just where is this O-line potentially in terms of what's your feelings about where we could rank with if everyone stays relatively healthy and plays to their position? Where are you thinking this line can be ranking in the NFL? It's like top 10, right?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to applaud Mekhi Becton, where he was like just a couple of months ago, like 40, 50 days ago, to the pictures we saw of him approaching training camp. You can tell that over the last 40 days, he's put in some serious work. Like, he was worrying a couple of months ago, and he looks now like he's ready to go. And we obviously will never find out quite how much weight he's lost over the last 40, 50 days, but he's obviously put a shift in the training facility with his nutritionist, being disciplined, which is what we wanted to see, and what perhaps is taken a while for him to grow up and appreciate and kind of mature as he's kind of come into the league. Because he came into the league as a young offensive tackle, to college football, kind of getting used to it, that acclimatization period. But he's put in the work. So I think the first thing is all Jets fans should be well chuffed to see what he's done. I think in terms of the offensive line, that the sky's the limit, really, in terms of how good they could be, particularly if Fant can continue playing at that top level. Elijah Vera-Tucker takes a step forward. Laken Tomlinson will be a massive, massive upgrade at the other guard position. I know he's playing left guard, and AVT's shifting over to the right-hand side. And then if Becton can reach his ceiling, and I appreciate Becton on the field is going to be a new player, because in his rookie season he was dominant, but he looks now like he's more explosive, leaner, and hopefully that will kind of translate to consistency, because in his rookie season there were those plays that he kind of got beaten a couple of times. I think he gave up 7 sacks in his rookie season. So if he can bring that number down in pass protection and kind of keep the same level of impact in the run game, he's going to be dominant. And if they all come on and kind of keep rising, it's going to be feasting. You're going to be feasting, particularly with that Breece Hall, Michael Carter behind them. I think obviously the question marks are perhaps bigger than other potentially top offensive lines. I think there are questions which need to be answered and will only be answered over the course of a 17-game season. Can Mekhi Becton play as many snaps as possible? Can Elijah Vera-Tucker take that step in pass protection? Can George Fant maintain that level of play? There are questions there which causes hesitation, but if they all come together, it's going to be feasting, baby.
Yeah, it will be, and with the way that the amount of talent you've got in the backfield, out wide and the tight end room, there's just so many options for Zach to really move the ball. He doesn't, like I say, he doesn't have to play hero ball. He just has to play within the offense, and it's going to be successful. I think we're just going to take a lot of teams by surprise. I don't care how hard that 9 games is on paper. It is hard, but also we're going to be really competitive moving the ball forward. I really think with Mike LaFleur, with his kind of, I think he's a really talented play caller. I think he's an up-and-coming offensive mind, and I think now he's finally got a wealth of talent and options to address different game plans and also scenarios within the game if the game changes. I think it's just really, really, really good. Really exciting. I mean, honestly, you don't want to see, it's always this optimism time at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of the training camp. So you want to kind of say, okay, hold on. We always feel optimistic at this point. But at this time, if you look back at previous years and going back to that kind of discussion about the Bears, it's like, yeah, we we are legitimately got a lot of talent. Like we're not kind of forcing so many issues here or there. There's legitimate easy pass for success there. And the defense just has to just be that little bit up, take that little step up, not be the worst ranked defense. If you can be kind of, 8 to 10 places higher, and just kind of keep things steady, I think we can have a successful season and beat some teams that we don't expect to beat.
Yeah, I mean, even just starting with that first game, if you look at the Baltimore Ravens offensive line, you'll have Tyler Linderbaum, was a top centre prospect, but he's not the biggest guy, and it'll be his first ever NFL game. You can get someone like Quinnen Williams over the top, rushing the middle, you can have success. Then on the right-hand side, you've got Kevin Zeitler, right guard, Morgan Moses, right tackle. They'll be playing their first games together. So that's 3 out of 5 of the Ravens line will be playing their first game together. And obviously the left-hand side, to give them credit, you got Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, Tyree Phillips at left guard. That's a good left-hand side line, but first game together, if your defensive line can get on top and get in Lamar Jackson's face and he's kind of having to scramble, try and make things happen, you've got a chance. So yeah. The offensive and defensive line for the Jets are going to be so important this season, and if they can kind of really take games by the scruff of the neck, we're going to be in with a chance.
Yeah, you can see there's game plans where if we can, it's definitely going to be how you stop the run. I think that's going to be how successful do they attack that. But if they can do it, somewhat, a big step up, if not be elite or good, just take a step up from how bad it was last year. It's going to make a big difference with the amount of the edge rushers and the corners that we have to stop in the pass game. So if we can just keep it somewhat moderate kind of success in stopping the run, that'll make a massive difference all over the field with the amount of talent we have. And I think with that, I mean, that's really, at this point now, we're just looking to see what happens in the first few days of training camp. Obviously, the news will come out in drips and drabs over the next week, and obviously we'll cover it on next week's show as well. I think that really wraps up kind of our discussion on how we feel at this point. And it's just what we see in the next week is going to be vital. So I think we'll wrap up the opening discussion and head over to our roster battle. Okay, so for this week's roster battle, we'll be covering the cornerback room. It's a room that was already looking, wasn't really a massive weakness, even though it wasn't great. There were some decent players there in their first year, but just naturally young and experienced, but I think played quite well in respect, but massive upgrades with DJ Reed coming in, with Sauce taken at the fourth overall pick in the draft. That kind of bumps down some other people into different positions, and I think it's a really strong group. So, I mean, it's pretty locked in. You think Sauce on one side, DJ Reed on the other, the new guys are going to take the two starting spots, Matt?
Yeah, I think it'd be foolish to assume otherwise. And what's really interesting about that is if we remember back to the pre-draft, I would hold my hands up, and I was not keen on taking Sauce at 4, and I was quite adamantly against it. And I think what's been interesting over the last months is kind of getting Salah's thoughts on that, and it sounds like, well, to take it back, the reason why I was kind of against it was because there's kind of been proof and evidence over the years that Salah hasn't necessarily relied on that shutdown corner in his defence and hasn't been so strong. So I thought it was perhaps a wasted value to go after. But listening to Salah over the last months, it sounds like there's been some self-evaluation, some reflection from his side and with Ulbrich about the value that a lockdown corner can make for his defence and kind of where they can come in and be utilised. And I don't quite know how that's going to manifest itself, but watching Reed and Gardner on the outside, it's going to be really interesting to see how they're used and kind of what roles they're given in terms of how Salah wants to kind of now place this increased value on his cornerbacks and really make sure that they're locking down, because normally they sit off quite deep. We've seen quite a lot in this cover 3 system with the kind of 3-3-5. You've got 3 people dropping and 2 playing underneath. Perhaps now we're going to see a bit more bump and run, kind of getting up to them in the line of scrimmage, playing that press coverage and stopping the ball coming out so quickly. I mean, I remember from being at the Atlanta game last season in person, when that pass rush wasn't getting home, Matt Ryan was just getting the ball out so quickly, and because we were playing so far off, they just were able to kind of just eat us up down the field. Those 8, 10, 12-yard chunks come out of you consistently. So perhaps that's one way we're going to see them. And I think it'll be interesting to see. And if there's rumours in training camp, and obviously it's hard to tell before you really get into the season because you don't want to give too much away in training camp. But are we going to see them play a bit more press? Are we going to see these guys kind of get up in the faces of receivers? Because these are two supremely talented cornerbacks. I mean, DJ Reed's kind of gone under the radar for a while in the league and has had his knocks against him because of his size. But my guy is a competitor. He fights, he hustles, he works hard. He wears his heart on his sleeve and does not want to get beat. And Sauce Gardner evaluated so much in the pre-draft prospect. You know, he's got that range, he's got that length. I mean, his measurables at the combine were ridiculous. So they're kind of like a bit chalk and cheese in the way that they're physically built, but they both play with that hustle. So I think absolutely, as you said, they're kind of locked into that 1 and 2 slot, left and right. It'd be interesting to see how they're used, and that's kind of what I'd watch out with them.
Yeah. I mean, and then you look at the kind of the slot corner starting role. You know, Michael Carter came in, did a really good job as a rookie, as a late round rookie as well, even better, and has provided, I think, a really good, value for his draft slot. And I think he's a solid player. You were floating another idea with another guy in the depth chart about how you would utilize him. Do you want to throw that out there?
Yeah, well, we got to be careful here because our co-host David is a massive MC2 fan, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He got the custom jersey made up for the Jets game last year and all this. So David, please don't take offense to anything that's about to come out of my mouth. But I think while replacing isn't the right word, I think what the Jets have this season that they perhaps have lacked in the past is kind of that creativity in the secondary, particularly at the corner position. As you kind of create depth for yourself, you give yourself more options. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they use players like Brandon Eccles, Bryce Hall, perhaps as replacements for Michael Carter II. So, for instance, if you're going up against Miami one week, and what the Jets have lacked in the past is that kind of secondary matchup player who they can move around the field and use to support against different types of players. So Miami, you're going up against a Mike Gesicki in the slot who's a bigger body. He basically is a tight end meets wide receiver type, so he splits out wide, but he's got that big tight end's body. So if you're trying to match someone up with that little bit extra length like Bryce Hall over Michael Carter II, you just give yourself a couple more options. Similarly, if it's someone smaller and faster, maybe a running back breaking out of the backfield. I don't know if you're playing who's on a like a Najee Harris out the backfield when we play Pittsburgh week 4. If you give yourself maybe Brandon Eccles there with that little bit extra speed to close the field. So I just think it'll be interesting to see. While it's not necessarily a battle in our roster battle sections, but I think the Jets now have more options in the backfield to kind of use their players as matchup defenders and really game plan a bit more. And this is not to take anything away from Michael Carter's rookie season in that slot position. He was top notch and way outperformed his expectations for where he was drafted. But the more we can kind of flex and use our players to shut down and kind of rotate, I think, in that slot position as needed, it's only going to be more successful. And I think that's kind of going to give the Jets more options to kind of play and arguably provide a bit of cover for that free safety slot opposite Whitehead, where there's that question mark in terms of that deep line safety.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an option, but I think also just, having Eccles and Hall there behind the two outside corners as depth for injury, because these things can happen, and a bad corner, again with another good corner on one side, and you have a weaker corner. That could be an absolute crack in the armor during a game plan, especially against really good teams. So to have really good guys as backups who can do a decent job filling in, that works well. And then, like you said, in certain game plans, if a team does go 4 wide for a certain amount of time, and you can play a dime, and you've got, say, the tight end on one side, a slot receiver on the other, MC2 can take the slot, and the tight end can be covered by Hall. In a game like even the Ravens, you got someone like Mark Andrews, who's such a focal point, but also obviously he plays central as a tight end. You can use him there. Maybe he'll have more success against him than, say, Michael Carter would. So it just, like you said, it just gives them flexibility, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how they use the rotation of their guys who are in the depth piece and still use them to give them snaps in certain game plans and certain scenarios within a game that may change. That you've got these different body types, different qualities in each guy, and really utilize the quality that you've got, not just as saying, oh, it's an insurance for injury, but actually saying, in this game, we're going to use this person more because we think they match up better with where the strengths of the opponent's offense is. So it's really good. It's a great way of building depth and building, the quality of a team in terms of having to, manage each game as it comes and have a unique game plan for each opponent. So it's really good. So you're looking at, something that's been floated about obviously with Hall is whether, if they like what they see with Dunn and with Eccles, whether Hall is somebody who could command a trade. If someone, say, if there's an injury on a decent team, they come in and they want to trade. I mean, what would be to lose that backup quality and to lose the ability to, as we talked about, be kind of like uniform, mix and match against opponents? What would it take? What kind of offer would it take for you to be okay with moving on with trading away Hall and what he can bring to the team?
Oh, that's a tough one. My head immediately went to a kind of like a third rounder value, because obviously we drafted him for a fifth round pick, and he's had the injury where it is, so I don't think you're going to get much higher than that. So yeah, I reckon around the third year, you've got someone who's proven that he can be an effective cornerback player. I don't think he's the best, and he's obviously got his limitations, particularly in terms of kind of identifying the ball, but he plays nasty, he plays hard. So if someone came in with a third round pick, and perhaps if there was injury worries or their two corners had gone down with injuries, you might be able to drive it up to something like a third and a fifth. Because you really have to ask yourself is, do you see Hall signing a second contract with the Jets? He's got 2 years left. But if DJ Reed pans out, if Sauce Gardner pans out, he's probably going to want to go and get a bigger payday somewhere else than stay in New York, which is entirely fair enough. And as we said last year, the players have one career. You got to go out there and try and make your money. So I think a third would probably get you listening and kind of start talking about it, because I mean, last year we traded Chris Herndon for a fourth round pick, and Bryce Hall is a better player than that. So I think you probably start the discussions about a third round pick.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion to have, because while you want to have the ability and the depth this season and to continue, having quality on the team, you don't really want to lose that. At the same time, we're still not, we're not a Super Bowl contender at this point going all out. We're still building, there's still building to be having. So like to have an extra third and, what Joe can extract from other teams. Sometimes he could get even more if he gets a team in a really a difficult situation. We would see. I love both scenarios. I really love the scenario we paint with like Hall being there with Eccles and the different way we can match up against teams. And if a good offer comes, I think I'm with you as well. You got to really consider that as well. But it's just something that that name's been floated about a lot in terms of now we can trade him. I don't think you trade him for anything more than something that really intrigues you. Like you're not just going to get rid of him for anything because he's a good player, good depth, and he gives you a good chess piece if they use him the way we're thinking it could be used. On the back,
it's a good position to be in, isn't it? That's the point.
Great.
And what Joe Douglas has done is he's put ourselves in positions where we're negotiating from a position of power, not a position of weakness. So ultimately, like whatever will be, I don't think it's going to be to the detriment of the New York Jets. Whether it's going to be keeping that depth on the back end and in the secondary, or you're accumulating picks for next season to give you that added flexibility in the 2023 draft class. So I think it's a good position to be in.
Absolutely. I mean, as you look through to the next part of the kind of the cornerback room, you get to an interesting situation where you're looking at, okay, so you've got the four guys that you would say are going to be like 1 to 4. Well, you've got Michael Carter. So you got Reed, you got Sauce, you got Carter, you got Eccles, and you got Bryce Hall. So those are like the top 5. You say they're locked in. Now Javelin Guidry's an interesting guy because he's the guy who's like, oh, he can be the guy who fills in for Michael Carter if anything happens. But in the scenario you paint, is he redundant in a way that, like, if injury should happen, we can manage in other ways, and maybe that roster spot goes to, we've got Isaiah Dunn still in the mix, and obviously Justin Hardy is a special team kind of captain, special team focused guy, but he obviously takes up a role as a cornerback on the roster. How do you think all that works out in terms of those three guys on the back end of the quarterback room?
Well, I think you kind of touched on something, and I think why Javelin Guidry kind of can really come into it is he's a natural speedster. He's competed at high college level athletics in the 100-meter sprint, and I think I don't want to say how fast he's gone, but I just know that it's fast. I'm going to Google it quickly while I'm talking. I think Javelin Guidry is an interesting one because if you can there is 10.13 Javelin Guidry ran at 100 meters while he was at University of Utah. That is rapid, 10.13. So on that point, I think he's got that really nice speed, which gives you something else in that room. And that could be used in special teams because you kind of get that crossover that perhaps Hardy doesn't give you, where if you can get Guidry with that speed as a gunner and in the kicking game, you are going to be putting pressure on those defenders a lot more. So perhaps that's where Guidry comes in. I think Justin Hardy is an interesting one because obviously he's a pure special teamer, and we've seen some of the most successful teams, the New England Patriots come to mind, have a designated special teams spot and excel in that. So the question with him is whether it's financially viable to keep him on the roster or not, and whether the Jets kind of want to make that cheap move. I'm sure Boyer would love Hardy to stay, but ultimately Joe Douglas might think that kind of, once you're into those 40s and 50s of the roster spot, he might want someone with a little bit more what's the word that I'm looking for? Versatility, options to play, kind of give you a bit more across the different phases of the game. Kind of taking on that cornerback role, being able to give you that same value on special teams, and just being a bit more of a contributor. And who was the last name? Remind me. It was Isaiah Dunn.
Isaiah Dunn, yeah.
Isaiah Dunn, I think he's got an uphill battle to make it onto the roster, if we're being honest. But the Jets liked him. They gave him a fairly sizable chunk as an undrafted free agent last year, didn't they? So they obviously see potential. So perhaps he's someone who you kind of look to practice squad for the upcoming season, and maybe if injuries happen or something, he can kind of step in. But I think given the depth and the names we've spoken about so far and how well they've all performed, I think, your Isaiah Dunn faces an uphill battle. So kind of three interesting names, all offering something different. I mean, Guidry is my favourite of them all just because of that natural pure speed. But I think that's kind of going to be interesting to see how they pan out.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, what they value, do they value Justin Hardy's, special teams play over what Guidry can offer as a defensive back? Or do they carry 7, and lose depth somewhere else? It's interesting to see what they'll do. I mean, Justin Hardy he didn't have the greatest season, but there was a few plays that I saw were highlighted where they were classic, like, heady special teams expert plays where he used, like, there was one play where he basically was running with as the gunner, he was running with the guy who was in kind of coverage of him, and he kind of moved out the way, didn't even touch the guy, moved out the way and let that guy crash into the guy who was receiving the ball. And it was a purely heady play where he just was allowed the guy's momentum, didn't touch him at all, but just allowed his own momentum to clatter into his own guy. And it was like it was a really, really clever play. You saw it did on purpose because he kind of pulled out kind of in a very specific way. Those little things can make a difference where the ball could pop out. It didn't on that time. The receiver was able to keep it, but you never know. These things can happen and you can change the game. So they got to really balance that to see, how much it does, who they're going to keep, who they won't. Maybe they say they subtract from another position group to give them their 6 plus Hardy. We'll see. I mean, I think this year is going to be the year where we do truly go, oh, that guy's a good player, and he's been waived, he's been cut. This is the year where there's just a lot of talent. As we go through these groups now, you're going to face more and more guys who we actually really like and go, yeah, he might not make it, so it just shows the quality on this team is improving, and then that's where you want to see, even though you don't always want to see potential quality players leave the team. Sometimes it's just you're just full of quality potential players, and so that's just where it goes. So no, it's been really good to talk about the cornerback group. I mean, for a few years ago, the cornerbacks were absolutely atrocious when we had Jamal and Marcus in the middle. The cornerbacks were absolutely atrocious. Now, hopefully, the cornerbacks looking good. Jordan Whitehead's a good player. I think that one other safety spot, and then you've got a pretty good defensive back unit across the board there. So yeah, the cornerback room should be one that really, really complements well with the pass rush, and hopefully does a lot better in us getting off the field on third down, because that was just an absolute heartbreaker. Sometimes when the running game was being stopped, when we were stopping the run, they were able to just pass through the air, run through the air almost, and just pick up those chunk plays. So it was just kind of, we were getting gashed one way or the other. Hopefully that just changes this year. So no, it looks really good, and yeah, Sauce Gardner, right? Your first pick in the first round. It was so exciting to see what he could become. He's getting so much buzz from the press, from other teammates. Very exciting. He kind of headlines this group as just that really, really high value acquisition in the draft. So really exciting times with this room. But yeah, so this is kind of wraps up this week's episode. We're going to kind of we're going to see what happens in the first week on the field. Hopefully there's some fun highlights and some good play, and Zach looks sharp, and the rest of the guys, and more importantly than anything, is that they stay healthy. Goodness, it's like last year was just such a scarring opposite. Every year happens, but with that Carl Lawson one was absolutely devastating. So just everyone stay healthy, please. Just make it to the season so we can at least see you guys and the potential that they have. Matt, is there anything you want to say to listeners before we head off?
No, just echoing what you said about staying healthy. And for anyone watching on video, you might notice that Braxton Berrios copied my hair with the bleached blonde look. So I'm taking full credit for that. The other thing as well, just on a UK NFL point, but
yeah,
Ticketmaster need to sort their shit out, because yesterday queuing up for the Packers games was an absolute joke, and now all the tickets are on StubHub for 3 times resale value. So
yeah,
sort it out, Ticketmaster. I got into the queue. The queue was meant to open at 9:30, but it opened 2 hours early. I got in there at 8:30. Was 33,000 in the queue.
It's crazy.
All of the Packers tickets were gone by the time I got in there, so I ended up going to Vikings v Saints. But man, they fucked it hard.
Well, that's a nice little ending of the show, where we're going to have to put the parental advisory on the episode on YouTube now. We were pretty clean until then, but no, absolutely worth a few curse words on that, a bit of swearing, because it was an absolute a scenario yesterday it was terrible. People were queuing up the night before and didn't get kicked out. They said people will get kicked out if they queue up before 9:30. They weren't, and it was a disaster. So they got to figure that out, because it's especially when you've got such a high profile event, you've got to give people a legitimate shot to get in, and have a set of rules to go by. So absolutely, but
just ban ticket touts and scalpers, man. You can't buy it's ridiculous that they're buying tickets and then selling them on StubHub for 350, 400 quid a ticket.
It's as long as sport exists, you're going to have touts going outside. It's just where it goes until they kind of find better ways to manage it. So it is what it is. But no, positivity, back to positivity. Jets looking great. Hopefully staying healthy. Have a great first week of training camp. And hopefully we get excited with some really hype videos, some great play from our young team. And we'll be back next week.